Welcome to TL Yarn Crafts TV. I'm Tony, your host, and today we'll be learning the absolutely beautiful and deceptively easy Tunisian Smock Stitch. So if you've never seen it before, welcome to the Tunisian Smock Stitch. I absolutely adore this stitch. It came into my life not too long ago, and I'm super excited to bring you this tutorial on exactly how to use it. I am going to be going through this tutorial assuming you have some knowledge of Tunisian crochet already. If you don't, reference my video notes. I've got a link to the Absolute Beginner's Guide to Tunisian Crochet that I did. So as far as the smock stitch, I found out about this not long ago, maybe just a couple weeks before I decided to do this tutorial. I found it on Facebook. I saw this woman who did not speak English make this absolutely beautiful pillow, and I loved it. I was like, I need to figure out what this is. Coincidentally, two other people from Facebook contacted me via TL Yarn Crafts and said, do you know this? Can you do a tutorial on this? I absolutely love this stitch. This is beautiful, but the videos I found on YouTube are really hard to understand, or they're incomplete, whereas they don't tell you how many to chain at first, how to bind off, what the beginning of the row looks like as opposed to the end. So I wanted to do a full tutorial so you can see from beginning to end how to make this gorgeous smock stitch. Some features of the fabric that you'll come to understand when you do it is this is a fairly thick fabric. Tunisian crochet just ends up being that way, just the way that it's worked. It does use a good amount of yarn, so you'll want to be prepared for that. But if you look at it, the definition is uncanny. And when you're actually working the stitch, you'll be able to see what parts of the actual process make it so it looks how it does. So your forward pass is what creates these little V's that you have, and then your return pass is what creates the fabric that's behind the V's. So that fabric being behind the V's is really what makes it stand out, because you've got the same color, yarn behind it, but you've got this gorgeous kind of lattice. It's really considered smock sitting on the front. Smock stitch comes from a similar technique, or at least a technique in sewing that creates something that looks similar to this. So you can search smocking, and the images will show you what smocking actually is, and this stitch kind of mimics that. There's another stitch in knitting that looks like this. So again, you've got a stitch in crochet that looks a lot like knitting, which I absolutely love. And another thing that I absolutely love about this stitch is it creates little to no curling. I had a little bit here because I always tend to tighten my very first stitch so I don't get loose edges. So it curls a little bit on this side, but if you look on the rest of the fabric here, it's not curling, and this is completely unblocked. So this is just kind of a quick swatch that I made to show you what the smock stitch looks like. So let's go ahead and jump in. We'll start by looking at our materials. For today's tutorial, I picked some of my favorite items to use. First, for the yarn, I used Bernat Maker Home Deck. I want to send a special thank you to my friends at Yarn Inspirations for providing this yarn today. So a little bit about Bernat Maker Home Deck. This is a cotton nylon blend. It's 72% cotton, 28% nylon. So the cotton gives it some really good integrity. It makes it really easy for washing and makes it super soft. The nylon kind of makes it indestructible. And then together these create a really gorgeous yarn, because the way that it's created is kind of like this chainette. So it's got a lot of really good definition. I would compare this to like a t-shirt yarn. The nice thing about this is it is only a level 5 bulky yarn, so it's not quite as heavy as t-shirt yarn, but you get a lot of the same effect. Also, this is a gigantic ball of yarn. It's got 317 yards, so you can make a lot of everything with it. I think the example of this pillow on the front really helps kind of drive the point home that this is wonderful for home decor projects. So I picked Home Deck specifically because it's really going to make the definition in the smock stitch stand out, and I just think it looks absolutely gorgeous. And then for our hook, I picked one from my Denise Interchangeables Tunisian Crochet hook set. I've included a link to my review of these hooks down in the bio so you can kind of take a look and see if this is something you'd be interested in yourself. The Bernat Home Deck calls for an 8mm hook, so of course with Tunisian Crochet we're going to go up a couple sizes, so I have a 10mm hook here. Starting our project, of course, we have to do a Tunisian foundation row, and that consists of course of making chains and then pulling up loops in those chains. More details about Tunisian foundation rows and some of the basics in my Tunisian Absolute Basics video, which I've linked below. So for this project, we want to start out with a chain that is in a multiple of 2, so an even number. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to chain 12. And then to start the forward pass of our foundation row, we're going to rotate our chain to work in the back bumps of our chain, and we're going to pull up a loop in each chain across and end up with 12 loops. So again, we work in the back bump because it ends up with this really nice neat chain that we can then work into if we want to, or if we're sewing up something like a pillow, it makes it so the edges are nice and neat. So we're pulling up a loop in all of our chains to the end. The last one gets a little fiddly, so usually I just end up going under 2 because it's easier and I am lazy. So to do our return row on our foundation, we're going to yarn over, chain 1. We always chain 1 at the beginning of a return pass. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 all the way back until we have 1 loop left on our hook. And that's our foundation row. Easy peasy. So I always like to kind of pull on my yarn a little bit, tighten the loop on this first chain just so you don't have loose edges, as I like to call them. So to start the first row of the smock stitch, there's some things that I want you to come to understand. There's some words I'm going to throw out at you and you're going to be like, Tony, that doesn't make any sense, but I promise you it is very easy in execution. So one thing about the Tunisian Smock Stitch, what helps it have its look is the way that you do your yarn overs. So the basis of this pattern is we're going to do yarn overs and then we're going to Tunisian simple stitch 2 stitches together to compensate for that yarn over and also to create the pattern. So to start the first row, we're going to yarn over, but instead of yarning over from top to bottom like normal, we're actually going to yarn over from bottom to top. If you're a knitter at all, you might consider this yarning over purlwise. For Tunisian crochet, I'm just going to say we're going to yarn over from bottom to top. And you're going to want to hold on to that yarn over because what we do next might cause it to slip off. So we're going to yarn over from bottom to top, hold on to that loop, and then we're going to work under the next 2 loops. And we're going to Tunisian simple stitch those 2 loops together. Yarn over and pull up that loop. So we did a yarn over and Tunisian simple stitching 2 stitches together, so we've created 2 additional loops on our hook. And we're going to do that all the way to the end of our row for our first row of the smock stitch. So we're going to yarn over from bottom to top, hold on to that loop, and then we're going to Tunisian simple stitch under the next 2 loops. Yarn over bottom to top, hold on to it, Tunisian simple stitch under the next 2 loops. Yarn over bottom to top, hold, we're going to slip under those next 2 loops, yarn over and pull up a loop. One more time, yarn over bottom to top, hold, Tunisian simple stitch under the next 2 loops. Okay, and now we are at the end, and at the end of this first row we're actually going to do our yarn over bottom to top again, hold on to it, and then we're going to work our edge stitch as normal, work under both of those loops with a Tunisian simple stitch. And that's our first row. It looks a little fiddly, a little insane right now, but I promise you as you continue to work this, it ends up clearing up a lot. Now another thing that you're going to notice is we have 13 loops on this hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Because we did that additional yarn over at the end, we have one extra stitch. All of your rows, all of your forward passes in Tunisian Smock Stitch will end up with one extra stitch because of that additional yarn over. For our return pass, we're going to complete it as we normally do. We're going to yarn over, chain 1, yarn over, and pull through 2 all the way back. Yarn over and pull through 2 all the way back to the beginning of your row till you have one loop left on your hook. Sorry about the tapping, folks. There we go. So that's the first row. Now what we can see so far, and let's pull out our original swatch here. So what we're seeing so far is this bottom row. As you can see on the bottom row here, it's not super defined smocking just yet. You just started, cut yourself some slack. It doesn't look perfect just yet. But you can see that we're starting to create the V's that we're going to be looking for. This row we just created by doing the Tunisian simple stitching 2 together will start to create the V's of your smock stitch. All right. So for row 2 and for all even rows, we're going to do something a little bit different. The smock stitch is a 2-row repeat that once you're in it, you will totally understand and it will not be difficult, I promise. So for row 2, we need to offset the row 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip all this riffraff over here. Just pretend like it's not even there. We're focusing on these kind of V's that we've created. To offset the work that we've done already, we're actually going to start row 2 with the Tunisian simple stitch under this first bar. We're going to do a Tunisian simple stitch under this first bar. All right. Now we're going to go back to what we were doing before, yarning over bottom to top, and then we're going to Tunisian simple stitch 2 stitches together. Now when you're working this, depending on how you pull that first Tunisian simple stitch, the next stitch you need to work into might have gotten a little lost. It's right here. It's the other side of this V. It's the other side of this V. And sometimes it gets lost depending on how you pull that first stitch. So we've done our yarn over bottom to top. We're going to slip under this first stitch and under the next stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over bottom to top. Again, that stitch we need to work into is right here. We're working under both loops. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarning over bottom to top. Insert under the next 2 loops, pull up a loop. Yarn over bottom to top. Insert under the next 2 and pull up a loop. You'll continue that across your row until you have 1 loop and then your edge stitch left. For this last loop, we're going to yarn over and work it as a Tunisian simple stitch. And then we're going to Tunisian simple stitch in our edge stitch. And that's row number 2. That's the forward pass. So now we can a little bit better see those V's starting to pop out. But let's kind of complete this row and see what we've got. So we're going to chain 1 to start our return pass, yarn over, pull through 2 all the way back. Pull through 2 until you have just 1 loop left on your hook, and that completes the return pass of row 2. So this is what we have so far. As you can see, row 1's V's were right here and row 2's V's are right here. So they're offset slightly, and that's kind of what creates that lattice effect in smocking. So for row 3, we're going to kind of line things back up with row 1. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to start by yarning over bottom to top. And then we're going to work into, as you can kind of see here, there's a V here. We're skipping the first stitch of this V and working into the second stitch of it. So we're going to yarn over bottom to top, skip that first leg of the V and work under the next 2 loops. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, bottom to top, and pull up under the next 2 loops. Yarn over, bottom to top, pull up the next 2 loops. So much easier than it looks, right? If you're going to make any mistakes, they're probably going to be in the first stitch or the last stitch of your row. On row 3, we're going to work a yarn over and 2 loops together all the way until the end. We're now at the edge stitch. We're going to yarn over, bottom to top, and work our Tunisian simple stitch at the end. Chain 1, complete our return pass as normal. So easy and so pretty to create. That's one thing that I love about Tunisian crochet, is that once you get the hang of it, it's super simple, but it creates this beautiful, really dramatic fabric. Look at that. It's coming together already. I absolutely love it. So that was row 3. We're going to do a couple more rows together and then our bind off. So now we're going to repeat row 2. Like I said, the Tunisian Smock Stitch is just a 2-row repeat. So we're going to be repeating row 2. So to start row 2, what you'll see is our row starts with a V here. What we're going to do, again, to offset the V's of the previous stitch, is we are going to work a Tunisian simple stitch under the first V, and then we're going to do our yarn over and begin our sequence again by doing Tunisian simple stitch 2 together, yarn over, 2 together. So we're going to start with the Tunisian simple stitch right here. We're going to yarn over, bottom to top, hold on to that loop, and pull up a loop in the next 2 stitches. Yarn over, Tunisian simple stitch in the next 2, yarn over, Tunisian simple in the next 2. An easy way to remember the sequence is if you start with a Tunisian simple stitch, you're going to end with a Tunisian simple stitch. Not in your edge stitch, that's always a Tunisian simple stitch. But in this row, we've got the second half of the V that we just worked. So we're going to yarn over and Tunisian simple stitch under that leg. So if that helps you to remember it, great. If not, just pretend I didn't even say it. So we did a yarn over Tunisian simple stitch. In that stitch, we're going to rotate our work towards us, work under those last 2 bars of our edge stitch, yarn over, chain 1, and return as normal, pulling through 2 loops until you have just 1 left. I adore this stitch. I've got a strong feeling that it is going to become my new favorite. I don't know, the honeycomb stitch might have some competition. So this is what we've got so far. Now you can very clearly, very, very clearly see all of the beautiful detail of the smocking on the front side of this fabric. Now, a lot of people are curious about the back side. Leaves a lot to be desired. Really not a true pattern going on back here. It is compensating for our yarn overs and our Tunisian simple stitching 2 together. So not much to see here, but the front is like, pow, it's so pretty. So let's repeat row 3. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a yarn over, and then if you open your work a little bit, you can see this first V. We're going to skip the first leg of that first V, work under the second leg of it, as well as the next stitch. Yarning over, bottom to top, working under the next 2. And we're going to yarn over and Tunisian simple stitch 2 together all the way to the end. There we go. So we're back at our edge stitch. That's all we have left here. Rotate it towards us, working under these 2 loops with a Tunisian simple stitch, chain 1, and yarn over and pull through 2 all the way back to the beginning. So simple. And the nice thing is you're trying out some different techniques here, and with Tunisian crochet, I mean, you can very easily take some of the other stitches that we've learned already, pair them up with some of these techniques, and make something really, really unique. So once you've got as many rows as you want and you've repeated rows 2 and 3 as much as you'd like, we're ready to bind off. You don't have to complete a certain row to bind off since each row creates V's. I like to bind off with the Tunisian slip stitch. It just makes a lot of sense to me. It's just the easiest one. So we're going to work in the first leg of this first V to bind off. We're just going to go under that leg, yarn over, pull through both loops. Go under the second leg of that V, yarn over, pull through both loops, and continue that all the way down the row to bind off. And now we just have our edge stitch again. We're going to rotate towards us, work under those two loops, and that is it, folks. Look at that pretty thing. Oh my gosh, I can't even deal with how gorgeous this little tiny swatch is. It's really adorable. So that's the Tunisian Smock Stitch. Super easy peasy. Again, you're going to start with a multiple of 2, and then you're just alternating Tunisian simple stitching 2 together and yarning over from bottom to top. If you have any questions about Tunisian crochet or this stitch, you're welcome to leave questions in the comments. Also check down in the show notes for information about the absolute basics of Tunisian crochet and also a really fun pattern that I've created using this stitch. If you can get through this tutorial, you can make this super fun pattern with me. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching my tutorial on the Tunisian Smock Stitch. I'm excited to introduce you to my newest pattern based on this stitch. This is the Cottage Throw Pillow. It's really straightforward, super easy to do. I finished it in less than 2 nights. It's awesome for a gift, maybe a housewarming, but you can also just keep it for yourself. I use less than 2 balls of Bernat Maker Home Deck yarn for this, but any category 5 bulky weight yarn will do perfectly. Find out more information and get a copy of this pattern in my Ravelry and Etsy shops, as well as on tlyarncrafts.com. You can visit the video notes for links to all of my shops.